Hello everyone and welcome back to Dorman Ventures. Today, I'm joined by Salman Habib, Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree and co-founder and CEO of Burq, an AI-based delivery infrastructure platform he scaled to nearly 100 employees starting from his very first company as a college sophomore. Have you ever sat in your room with an idea you weren't sure anyone actually needed? Have you ever spent months building something only to feel like you were going in circles? Have you ever wondered how you're supposed to grow from managing a team of 2 to leading a company of 50? If any of that sounds familiar, listen, you're not alone. These are the exact growing pains that every founder goes through. And today's episode was made exactly for you. Salman has been through every one of those stages himself, starting right where many of you are now. In this episode, he walks us through how to find real signals that your idea is worth building, how to stay locked in on the work that actually matters when everything around you is pulling you toward the glamour of startup culture, and how to grow into the leader your company needs as it scales. It's a full founder journey, from first idea to real company, laid out by someone who has lived it. All right, enough talk. Let's dive right in. Hope y'all enjoy. Salman, thank you so much for hopping on Dorman Ventures. I'm really excited about this episode. We got a lot to discuss, a lot of insights for our young student founders. Once again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Glad to be here, Zaki.
Wonderful, wonderful. So before we hop into things, I want to hear a little bit about yourself. You have a really interesting story, some really nice accolades, and you're the founder, co-founder, I should say, of a really impressive startup. So just, and as much you could wrap up, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, let's see. I'll try to wrap it up very quickly. I came to the U.S. when I was 13. Family decided to come to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is a very interesting choice to begin with. Did my high school in Virginia, went to college in Boston, started my first company in my sophomore year. And at the time, my co-founder and I, we were looking for pain points around our vicinity. What are some issues that students were facing? And this goes back to, of course, being a student ourselves. And we saw an opportunity to help businesses around college campuses with how they attract and how they bring students to their businesses, and how can we help them with that process. Did that for a couple of years, and now 4.5, 5 years ago started Burq, which is what I'm working on today. And Burq is an AI-based delivery infrastructure that is helping brands with meeting the customer expectation of ultra-fast delivery. At the end of the day, one of the things that we noticed is that customer expectations have changed drastically across the board. They expect faster delivery times, but that expectation wasn't being met by a lot of the brands, because to do that, you have to build massive infrastructure, whether that's routing technologies, partnering up with multiple delivery providers, building your own fleet. So the catalyst behind Burq was, how can we solve for that problem for businesses so that they can better compete with, of course, the large mammoths that are in the space, but also how can they better attract and meet the customer expectation. So that's what we're working on today.
Wow, that's amazing. And kind of tapping a little bit into Burq, because, even from when you started up until now, it's an amazing insight for our student founders to see the whole process of how it's scaled and how it's grown and how you've grown throughout it. I'm really curious. You've given us background as to how the idea took shape. I'm specifically curious as to what validation looked like, especially in the early days of Burq.
I think at the end of the day, there's a series of incidents that a founder has to keep an eye out for that help you understand and make a decision if indeed you've hit a product market fit, or if your product has been validated by the customers. Now, in some rare cases, and I think that has happened quite a few times, you come across a single event and you get thousands and millions of customers that suddenly start using your product. That's a viral effect. That generally doesn't happen that often. It can happen, but it doesn't happen that often. In our case, and in majority of the cases that at least I've seen with my founder friends and companies that I keep track of, it's a series of incidents. Almost think about, on a piece of paper, you have multiple dots. And then if you can draw a line between those dots, then you can see that, oh man, we have a product market fit and we have customers that have validated our idea. In Burq's case, let me see if I can think about what were the initial events that took place. One that comes to mind is very early on. I think this is a few weeks into us having launched our product, that we were getting more traffic than we were anticipating. So the system just wasn't ready to take on as much traffic as, again, this is MVP a few weeks in, we're still building the product, and our system shuts down. And I still remember getting phone calls and emails from customers who were visibly very upset that why did it happen? And to be honest, in that behavior of customers being upset, there's something positive that we saw, which was we've built something that these customers actually want, and they're not happy that it went down. And that's the core component that you're looking for from these series of incidents. Have you built something that customers want to use and customers would feel upset or would feel different if it doesn't exist? And if that is something you can hone down on, then you know that you have a product market fit. So that was one incident that I still remember very well. Continuously from there onward, I think what our team has done and does to this day is any feature, any product that we are about to launch, we go to our customers first. We get customer feedback. Our team has done a good job with sort of building customer feedback loops. And in that process, we're then still looking for indicators whether customers like it or are they actually wanting it or they need it. So some of the signs that we're looking for is if a customer says, "This is nice," and that's pretty much it. What you've built looks good, feels good. Okay, good. But then imagine if a customer says that what you just showed me, what you demoed me, can I get access to this next week? Can I get access to this a month from now? If that's happening and it happens over and over again, then you know that what you've built is sticky. Customers truly need it. So again, series of events, not a single event, and you really have to keep an eye out to then form your opinion whether you've had a product market fit or if your product has been validated.
Definitely, I love that you bring that up because there's there's so much to talk about this idea of, really seeing conviction in someone using your product or seeing your product that shows, this fit within the market. I was just having a previous conversation for this podcast with Nelson Chu, and the whole podcast episode was about the hair on fire problem, right? The idea of, are you solving a real problem? Does this really exist? And a huge part of that naturally is, looking at product market fit, looking at customer discovery. And one thing we mentioned is that this is actually from my personal experience. I had a startup early on in college, and we were talking to several people, several different people within the banking industry. It was a fintech banking company. And when talking with them, showing them the product, it was exactly like you mentioned, like, hey, this is a nice idea. This is nice. But when it finally came to us rolling out the demo, we said, why don't we put a little price tag behind the wait list so that we can really kind of have that obstacle to jump over to really show that these people have conviction in using our product. Boom! No one wanted, no one signed up for the wait list. So it's in moments like that where I'm so glad you mentioned that because I think it's such an important thing that founders are constantly aware of as they scale. As you mentioned, you continue to do it at Burq to this day. They're constantly, auditing and checking how customers view the product and whether they see it as, nice to have or a real need within, their respective space. So I love that you bring it up.
Yeah. And one thing, Zaki, that I'll add very quickly, you bring up a very good point, which is if you start monetizing, then can you see that those customers or those prospective customers that you're trying to sell, are they buying it or not? There is still a fine balance between what a founder truly believes in, because once in a lifetime, you do come across products, you do come across ideas where uh, the general populace does not agree with it, yet they still take off. And I think part of it is the behavior that those products are trying to change are pretty much set in stone. And in those moments, you have to be very careful if you keep getting negative feedback to still persevere, to still iterate, to still stick with the gut feeling that a founder has, that insight that a founder has, and go out, at least try it out, at least build it. And don't just stop because you went to 10 people, you asked them to pay for it, they didn't decide to pay. Should not necessarily automatically mean that you just shut your idea down and then you move on. So I just want to make sure that there is that fine balance between how much you try, but again, you have to try enough to validate something that you're working on.
Definitely. Is that something you personally had to deal with throughout your entire entrepreneurial journey?
Somewhat. I think the space that we're in, we had a very specific problem that we were solving for. And generally speaking, it does help if you are operating within a specific industry, because then you know, as an industry, what are the major macro challenges, what are some micro challenges, and then you're looking to build whatever insight you have, whatever product you're trying to within those macro and micro environments. Um, it's more of a challenge, I think, for consumer startups because it's not as easy to get feedback, especially if you're targeting um, C2C businesses. So yeah, we haven't really seen that challenge ourselves, but something that I've seen with other companies very well.
Definitely. Yeah, and the student startup space is full of C2C startups and even ideas to lead up to startups. And I'm curious, how would you recommend those students who don't really have much behind their belt, not much experience, how can they build that conviction in their product if it seems like everyone they're speaking to isn't seeing it the same way?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, your first idea is not going to be perfect. And again, in some cases it can. Don't get me wrong. There have been events where the very first idea, the very first product iteration takes off, and it's phenomenal. And then you get movies made about those, right? Uh, it just doesn't happen too often. Majority of the times, your first idea is not perfect. You build it, you get feedback, you have people that are fundamentally against that idea, that they think it cannot work. Then you have people that are in support of that idea. And then you chase those people that are in support, and you try to understand the ones that are against to see what you can improve. But in all of this, there is a constant iteration process. You have to iterate very quickly. And that is one thing that I'll emphasize on. At the end of the day, it's not about that first idea. It's about where that idea leads you to with constant iteration. And we did that. Everyone does it, right? If I look back where we started 5 years ago, or my first company where we started when I was sophomore in college versus where we ended, completely different, right? The foundation can stay the same, but the outcome and sort of the structure can be very different based on all the external indicators that you're getting from your customers, from your advisors, etc. So that's one thing that I would emphasize, which is iterate and iterate very fast.
Definitely. Yeah, you hear a lot about how these startups really focus on building the best product before releasing even, their MVP. And everyone says, just get out whatever you can and just pivot and iterate as you continue. I think that's an amazing point for our
And I
founders.
think part of it is also, if you were to visualize, you spend 6 months building a phenomenal product that you think is perfect, and you launch it and it doesn't go too well. Versus you build something and within the first 2 weeks, you launch it and then you get 100 people tell you what's wrong about it. And then you iterate and then you do that for 6 months. In the latter part, in those 6 months, you've built a phenomenal product that has now taken into consideration at least 300 people's opinion and feedback. Versus in the first, it's you thinking that you built a phenomenal, perfect product. So yes, I completely agree that in that case, it's much better to launch it, reiterate, and take as much feedback as possible. No one's stealing your idea. Which, by the way, I think we should get into it at a certain point. When I was a college student, I always thought that if I tell someone my idea, someone's going to steal it.
Hmm.
And I think early on in my sophomore year, I was walking around with confidentiality agreements, and I
Yeah.
actually did. I built. I had a friend who was in the law school, and I had him create a template of mutual, not even mutual, just NDAs, and I would go have people sign it before I tell them my idea. And I realized later on that it doesn't happen too often. Yeah, no one's stealing your idea because at the end of the day, idea is just one part of what you're doing. The most important part is the execution. It's building the product. It's getting it out there, distribution channels. So yeah, don't be afraid to share your idea and get feedback.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. It's funny that you mentioned that because that's something very similar that I went through. I'll never forget we brought our first developers on board to help us build our MVP, and we had them all sign an NDA, which was really funny. I'll never forget one time we were at New York Tech Week, and I was in the elevator going to some Tech Week event, and some gentleman was there in the elevator asking me about my idea. And it got very, very awkward because I seemed very standoffish because I was very worried to tell him. Looking back on it now, it's just something I laugh about because, like you mentioned, it really comes down to execution. Ideas are just ideas. You really need the execution behind it, and that's not something that can just be easily stolen, right? And now that we've talked a lot about validation, early stages, kind of going back to your story with Burke, at what point did you realize post validation, moving forward and scaling forward from there? At what stage did you realize this is worth kind of putting it all in for?
It's a good question. I think every founder starts their journey, and I hope everyone does that, thinking that you're all in. Otherwise, I don't think there should be that vagueness that maybe if it doesn't work out, I'll do something else. No, if you're fully committed to your idea, if you truly have, I think I keep going back to having an insight. You know something that others don't. And if you truly believe in that, then it should be day one or day zero that you're fully committed to it. And then from there onwards, the only thing that changes for the founder is that execution part, that figuring out distribution part, building out the team. Um, I don't think it should be where 6 months in, when you have your first few customers, that you realize, okay, now I can I can spend 20 hours now or 30 hours. Uh, it needs to be from the get-go, because that, at least for founders, that needs to be the case. And then from there onwards, figure out everything else that needs to be figured out.
Definitely, definitely. And this is kind of something that plays a role not just in the early stages, not just in the later stages, but throughout everything. The idea of one's network, right? Networking in general. And this is really key, especially for student founders, because as you build and as you build your own career, it'll play a role everywhere. So I'm curious, how important was networking in unlocking early traction for you guys? And do you have any insights regarding networking for student founders?
Yeah, I think there are two ways. The two ways to look at why someone would network, and what's the need. If you're networking early on because you're looking for a co-founder, or if you're looking for idea validation, if you're looking for general advice on how to get started, that's completely fine, right? You need to surround yourself in environments. And I think that's where a lot of colleges now have innovation labs. They have different programmings for student entrepreneurs to learn how to get started. They can speak with other entrepreneurs. I think that's very important. Everyone should do that, right? Especially in a case where you're still looking for that insight. You're still looking for what pain point you're trying to solve. You're looking for a team and founders. So that makes sense. Do networking there, spend some time. As soon as you have it, as soon as you know what you're working on, as soon as you have a team or a co-founder, I don't think networking is important at that point. What is truly important at that point is building your product as quickly as you can, as we talked about earlier. And then second, figuring out the distribution strategy, right? Someone once told me that as a founder, either you're building or you're selling. And selling in this case, let's say, is figuring out distribution, how to get out to the market. And in that moment, I think that networking can be a bit noisy if you're building and selling, unless you're selling at a conference or trade show and you have to network there, that's completely fine. So that's what I would suggest. Network when it's needed, but when you have it, when you know what you're working on, stay heads down, build your product, launch it, get customers, reiterate. And that's the most critical thing that you can work on. And it ties back to sort of what a lot of student founders, and I did it myself, do when they're working on their startup idea, is that you start going into and doing things that are not as critical, press and branding and creating fancy pitch decks, sort of marketing videos and this and that. And there's time and place for those things, but early on, that's not important. Stay focused on product market fit, getting customers, and that's pretty much it. And it looks and it seems like what a cliche and what a simple advice that everyone should follow, right? Just build your product and get customers. When I received that advice when I was a student, it felt that way. That of course, yes, I will just work and get my idea validated. But day in and day out, it's you kind of go in the direction where it's a lot easier to do press and branding because it feels good. It's easier. And the harder part is that which is building your product and figuring out the distribution. So do that, do the hard part, and everything else will follow.
Definitely. That's a great point. You don't want to be one of those startups that have t-shirts and merchandise before their first product. So
100%. Yeah.
I think that's a
Don't
great.
do that.
No, I could only imagine. I've seen those before. I think in the founder space, especially in the university kind of ecosystem, there's a lot of glamour behind the idea of what a startup is. And I think that that's kind of the main pitfall when it comes to that space. I think, people focus less on building and on selling, mainly because they're so focused on kind of the vanity of everything, making everything look good, making themselves look larger than life. I think that's a great point. And kind of tapping into the startup ecosystem and kind of moving more towards that. I'm curious, from you being directly within it and also just scaling from it, what are some unique advantages that you would say that founders have, specifically student college founders have, compared to just people who are post grad or didn't go to college or anything like that?
Yeah. That's a very good question. I think there are a couple of things, and I'll try to, Zaki, what you said earlier when we started the conversation. What are some things that um, students possess today that makes it easier for them to start companies, even though you don't have the capital, even though you don't have fancy investors or massive team and whatnot? I think there are a couple of things that are very unique to college students that others don't. Number one, you can take more risks. You're at a stage in life where you're a student, you're still going to your classes, but a few hours of commitment on the side can give you a very strong upside potential. So you can, number one, you can take more risks compared to someone who is out of college and has now pay a mortgage and has family, has kids. Number two, uh, you're in a controlled environment where you can test your idea very quickly. Think about that, right? If I am not on a college campus and I have to validate an idea, chances are almost majority of adults, unless you're very socially active, majority of adults have a very close knit friend circle, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 30. And that's pretty much it. You'll go to them, you'll try to validate your idea, and that's pretty much it. And from there onwards, you'll have to figure out conferences and trade shows, which will cost you a lot of capital. But think about college campus, right? A controlled environment, geographically it's controlled. You're going to your classes, you're seeing people day in and day out. What a better way, right? The best way to then validate your idea in a very sort of cost-effective manner. So I think those things combined. And third, on top of it, if your college has entrepreneurial groups, if college has sort of these innovation labs where they're giving you access to advisors and future investors, it generally gets harder once you come out of college to then start a company. So I would say a mix of those things does make it a lot easier for students to test an idea, launch a product, compared to, let's say, if you don't have that network.
Definitely. Yeah, and kind of comparing this to when you started, what would you say is different, kind of in the entrepreneurial space about building a startup as a student now in 2026 versus when you originally started your sophomore year of university?
See, let me put myself in as a student, although that was a couple of years ago now. Let's see what's different. Number one, I would say the the barrier to start a new company, or let me take a step back, not start a new company, because that can come across as sort of like vanity, because I have a new company and logo and this and that. No, to build a new product, the barrier to build a new product in today's day and age has collapsed drastically because of the advent of AI. Now you have applications where you can very easily brainstorm your idea, right? Imagine doing that back in the days. Even when I was starting a company, you would have to chase your friends, have them sit down with you, and almost majority of the times they're not even serious about it, and you're trying to pitch your idea and trying to get feedback. You don't have to do that anymore. Still do it. Of course, you need human feedback. But for the majority of it, you can brainstorm your idea very well with whether that's GPT, whether that's Claude. And then on top of it, it's not just brainstorming, it's you can build them with no code AI solutions. Back in the days, you would have to find engineers and convince them that I won't pay you a single dime and you have to code my application. You don't have to do that anymore. So with all of that, and then on top of it, of course, with AI, but on top of it, the access that companies or students have now to global talent, whether that's international students, but in general, global talent through sort of contracting applications that you can access, it's a lot easier to start companies today than it was a couple of years ago. Now that the question becomes, if it is that easy to start companies, what should founders focus on, right? What should students spend their time? And I keep getting back to this point that number one, focus on finding that critical insight, finding that real pain point that you know about that others don't. And this is truly where you have to go beyond uh, your dorm room to understand what is happening broadly outside in the tech universe. Um, Stay up to date with what companies are publishing. Try to understand what product launches are they making. Attend events, attend trade shows that can give you an idea, that can give you that critical insight that others don't. As soon as you have an insight, then, as we talked about earlier, build your idea. Your first idea is not going to be perfect. Just get started. Build something, reiterate, constantly evolve, get as much feedback as possible. If you have done that, number three, focus on distribution strategy. That is the most important thing that founders, student founders, and broadly speaking, every founder should focus on. There's so many products out there now, especially with AI, because you can just build anything today, that and these are amazing products, but they're not successful because they haven't figured out the distribution strategy. So figure that out. How are you going to get your product to your customers? Whether that's sales, whether that's whatever strategy, marketing, whatever you need to figure out, do that. So do those three things. It is generally a lot easier to build startups now than it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Definitely. Yeah, and you bring a wonderful point about AI and how students can leverage it in a way that, people before couldn't imagine or think of. And, Burke uses AI as well. And you guys have kind of honed in on this idea of how to best leverage it and kind of providing that insight and scoping it down to the college space for student founders. I'm curious, how should students approach it? Is it something they should leverage? Is it kind of selective where they should use it? How should they think about it? Because you got some students on one side that just throw it at the wall and hope something sticks, and others who are very, very conservative in their usage of it. Where on the spectrum should student founders' usage of AI lie?
Yeah, you have to use it, right? And then the question becomes, you're asking the right question, how do you use it, right? And I think that debate still hasn't settled. It's a little bit too early for someone to come in and say, okay, this is the best way to use AI. I think we're still perhaps a few years, and in the age of AI, years can be months, a few months away from settling that debate, although I think it's going to take a little bit longer than that. To me personally, I think what's important is critical thinking has to come from you, has to come from you as a founder, has to come from you as a student. Um, you should use AI to give yourself more material that can enhance your critical thinking. And what I mean by that is, let's just imagine there's one way to use AI where I go into ChatGPT, I go into Claude, and I say, this is what I want to do. It spits out that this is what you should do, and I take that recommendation blindly and I go do it, right? Versus the other way is I go to ChatGPT, I go to Claude, and I ask a very specific set of questions that, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And these are the guardrails. These are the measurements. These are sort of the pros and cons that I think to be true. And I don't need you to tell me that they're wrong because I truly believe them to be true. So you really have to stick up for yourself at that point, and then have it come back with more material that can enhance your thinking. That is what I would say working with AI, right? And not necessarily having AI tell you what to do. And that is what founders should focus on. That is what students should focus on. That is what I believe everyone should focus on. You cannot just, you can't say that I won't use AI, because what we're seeing even in our company, of course, with the use of AI, that there's incrementally more work you can do. You can be more productive. And the question then becomes, what's the right way to do it? So critical thinking comes from you. Get more material from AI that can supplement your thinking.
Yeah, so it's more or less allowing it to complement your critical thinking instead of letting it completely replace it.
100%. And argue with it, right? So many times, right? Um, I think there are times when I'm playing with AI, and e- even saying things like, "Hey, you could have given me a better answer," right? Saying that to AI, generally speaking, at times it'll come back with a much better answer than it did earlier. So a little bit of sort of a pushback. I'm not saying go in and start blazing AI with anything, but just a little bit of pushback that, hey, give me a better answer. Why haven't you thought about this? Why haven't you thought about that? It generally helps, but that has to come from you. AI is not going to do that for you.
Definitely, definitely. Critical thinking from the individuals, hands down the most important thing. And while still on this topic about the entire, startup ecosystem, especially for founders, very interesting question. In the similar way, this has been a debate for a while now. Is every student built out to be a founder? Is every student built out to be an entrepreneur? Is it a select few? And how can a student know, even a listener, how can they know, they're actually set out and built to start something?
Try it out. You just won't know. Even if you're thinking about that question, whether am I built for running a startup or building a product? Well, you're you're already on the path to build something. So why not try it out and see if you're really meant for it? And there's no better time to do it than when you're a student, right? Don't question it. And I think that's I've received a lot of different advices from our advisors back in college and of course over the past couple of years. And one of the advice that I received was uh, start when you think you're not ready because you will never be ready to start a company, right? So even if you feel like you're not ready, start because you're the natural feeling in you will keep telling you that no, let's get this first. Let's hit this achievement first, and then I'll go build a company. Don't fall into that. If you're getting a feeling, then just go at it. Try it out, see if it works. Especially if you're in college, give it a few months, give it a year or two, because you can take that risk. If it works out, if it works out. If it doesn't, then you have so many other possibilities that you can go venture into.
Definitely. Yeah. And I would say from mine, most definitely, probably from your experience as well, one of the biggest things about being someone built out for a startup for the entrepreneurial space is not only having critical thinking, not only able to take proper risks, but also being able to be a good leader. I think that that's especially key, especially given your role as co-founder at Burke. And you know stepping into that scene, this idea of being a leader and just having that founder mindset, I want to discuss this, and I want to discuss it in context of scale. So, a lot of student founders right now, they're very early stage, but they're definitely anticipating growth down the line. And they may be unsure, particularly how their personal style of leadership or just being a founder will change as their company changes. And I'm kind of curious, as a founder yourself, how did your priorities and your role itself have to change from 0 to 10 to 100 employees?
It's a very good question, and something that I'm still learning myself. We're growing, and I think it's very different, as you mentioned, when you're a team of 10 versus when you're a team of 50 versus when you're a team of 100. I would say that the hardest part about being a founder, there are a lot of things. And of course, conventional wisdom says that it's the number of hours you're putting in, the risk that you're taking, and that is all true, right? For me personally, an additional layer to that was you as a founder have to grow faster than your company is growing.
Interesting.
And the reason I say that is you're still the same person when your team is at 10. And very quickly, your company can go to 100 in a matter of few weeks or in a matter of few months. That happens. And you're still the same person, right? What changes then? And what should change? What should be the behavioral change in you when you're leading a team of 10 versus when you're leading a team of 100? Because it's very different. So you as a founder have to keep a keen eye on the fact that you have to be growing faster than your company, whether that's reading uh, journeys of people that have gone through it. Uh, let's say you're at a seed stage and reading about founders that are at Series B and Series, let's say they've gone IPO. and public companies, and trying to understand and trying to project what is that is going to come your way. So to me, that is extremely important. And within that, if I think about my own personal journey, um, for me, the biggest sort of lesson in all of this, trying to stay ahead of the company growth was, and I think for each founder it could be a little bit different. For some, it's it could be capital. For some, it could be different things. For me personally, it was the team. Realizing as the company was scaling that your team is much more important than you had initially anticipated. So when we were a team of 10, it's a lot easier to do everything yourself. It feels kind of heroic that I can do everything myself. I have a pulse on everything, and which
Mhm.
you should. I completely agree with the fact that there's a debate, by the way, that should founders have pulse on everything. I completely agree they should. But when you have a team of 10, it's a lot easier. You feel good because you can do all of these things. And as the company scales, you start realizing that you can't do everything yourself. You need a team that can do it for you. But even within that, uh, a founder, at least the ones that I've spoken to, myself including, have gone through stages where the first realization, the first stage is we need a team. The second stage, a couple of months later, a couple of years later, is that, oh man, we need a talented team, not just a team, right? And then you start thinking about, okay, the team that I have today, how do we make sure that they're constantly evolving as the company is growing? That's the second stage. And the third stage then is, oh man, not just that we need a talented team, we need talented team that is hardworking because there's so much work that's taking on. And then you start thinking about operationalizing your team. How do you make sure that the output is more than what it was initially? Now, for some founders, you can compress that, and it's ideal if you can compress all of those stages into one. Then you're lucky, right? That's phenomenal. But generally speaking, I've seen founders go through that journey in different stages.
Definitely. Yeah, and one thing that really caught my attention is that change from 10 employees to a much larger team in which, you know, you kind of take it upon yourself to kind of boost your ego a little bit when you can manage everything on your own. I'm curious to know from your experience, what did that growth into stepping into more delegation look like? Because I know a lot of student founders are in that stage where they may be building a team, but they're kind of still stuck on that idea of wanting to manage everything themselves. But at the end of the day, the last thing a startup needs is 50 employees and a founder that just does everything on their own. So what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think the golden principle that everyone can follow is if you as a founder know how to run a function, that function could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be engineering, product. If you know it in and out and you've done it so many times, it's natural to you, right? You can step into that function, and you know what problems that function is facing, delegate it. You've mastered that function at that point or to a certain extent. It's time for someone else to take it on. And for you as a founder, then go figure out something that you don't have mastery on, right? Because you need to make sure that you're looking into each function and you have good idea of what's happening into each one of those functions. So if you're a founder that has, let's say, mastery over the sales function, delegate it to someone else. Because if that person isn't doing well, then you know what's going wrong, right? You have an indicator, you know you've done it before. It's natural to you, and then you can keep a pulse on, is this person the right fit to lead this function? And you, let's say, go on to marketing, you go on to product, you go on to whatever engineering, what you have to in that moment. So I think that is something that we followed internally as well, me and my co-founder. Um, and from there onward, you start building your leadership team. You add managers, and then very easily you can then sync with those managers, perhaps just once in a week, and then you know very well what they're working on because you did it yourself. I personally led sales for the longest time. Um, I did SMB sales, I did enterprise sales, and then we got to a point where we had large enough sales team that I couldn't do one-on-ones with our salespeople. And then we recently brought on board a VP of sales. So it's a natural process that you go through, but there are principles that you can follow.
Yeah, I think that's huge because, you know, the last thing you want is to be kind of not as a founder, not familiar with any segment of your company and just delegating tasks and giving those roles to other people because That way, very quickly, you become detached from your own company. You have no autonomy or understanding of anything going on, and that can just be a whole set of messes.
100%.
And
And when you go out fundraising, by the way, that is something that investors can very easily tell how much of a pulse you have on your company. If they're asking you questions and your response is that, let me go back and come back to you with an answer, and it's taking you a couple of days then to go figure out which manager and which team member in your company knows the answer, that's a problem. You should be well aware. Now, one caveat into all of this is that uh, Burq is at almost 100 employees. So I don't know what it looks like if you have 500 or 1,000 employees. So if someone who's listening to this and they're like, no, Salman, that's not true. When you have 1,000 employees, I don't know that yet. We haven't gotten to that point yet.
yeah, definitely. I mean, that's amazing. And, you know, stepping into this might be something a little bit more personal, but I'm curious because anecdotally, I think that's one of the best ways to learn. You know, what was one of the biggest mistakes you think you made as a founder, whether it's through Burke or even before it, that you think would be one of the greatest learning lessons for our listeners?
You make so many mistakes. I'm trying to go through the list, see which one I'm not too embarrassed to share. I think what I mentioned earlier, team, is very, very important. I knew that. I knew that. Did I follow that advice? No. Which hence the reason why I was saying earlier that it seems such a simple advice when someone tells you when you're starting your entrepreneurial journey that focus on your team. Um, of course, you have your product, you have distribution, but even those can get unlocked if you have the right team with you, if you have the right people with you. Um, I was lucky enough to have the best co-founder I can possibly imagine. He's my older brother,
Yeah,
so that, I'm lucky enough to have him. But when you think about the broader team, that was, I wouldn't say a mistake, but rather something that we could have focused much more on in the initial stages. That and the second thing, and I think I already mentioned it, uh, not getting boggled by sort of the vanity metrics, press releases and branding, and sort of I think Zaki, you brought it up, having merchandise before your first few customers. Don't do that. I don't think we did it too much. We did it in our first company a little bit. So yeah, those two things I would say are things to remember when you're starting a company, and at least for me, some lessons for myself.
definitely. Definitely. I mean, that's very helpful and insightful for a lot of listeners, especially in the startup space for universities where vanity and glamour is kind of the main focus. Salman, as we close out today, I have one really big question that I've kind of been itching to ask. What's one belief about entrepreneurship that you think young founders need to internalize more?
It's not it's not all glamour when you're building a startup, and it doesn't need to be glamour. Let me try to word it in a different way. You get to a point. I think you're hitting on something that I've been chatting about with a lot of my founder friends. You get to a point where um, a lot of your time is spent just working with your team. So there is some sort of social isolation that takes place. You're not going to networking events. You're not, and maybe founders do it. It's great that they find time to do it, but in majority of the cases, you do get to a point where your head's down, day in and day out. You're working on your product. You're working on your building your team. You're working on helping your customers. It's not glamorous. It's repetitive tasks. It's things that you just have to do, and they have to be done. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, because from the outside, it looks like, oh, you're traveling, you have trade shows and conferences, you have all the swag items and this and that. It might look a little glamorous than it truly is. And if you can internalize that, hey, it's completely fine if I have to lock myself in a room for 4 days and ship something out. It's completely fine if I need to get on a call with 200 customers or make 200 calls in a single day and hear from the other side angry customers, or not even customers, angry prospects that want me to not call them anymore. And they might be, you know, really upset because I'm calling and selling them. It's completely fine. You have to do it. Someone has to do it. And and to be honest, founder has to do it first before someone else does that for you. Um, if you can internalize that, I think you can go build very successful companies. And one example that I'll use is my junior year of college, my co-founder and I, we would walk throughout Boston pitching restaurants and coffee shops and small mom and pop businesses to use our product. And it felt weird. It felt kind of like, oh man, we're doing this like a junior level sales job, and these people are selling to restaurants is the hardest thing, by the way. Whenever you go up to them, the owners are very busy. They don't want to listen to you. They're busy with their customers, so they're shouting back at you, and they're like, don't walk into my restaurant. Don't ever show up here. And you take that on, and you still persevere. You still go do it. So internalize that it's fine, and everything will be fine from there onwards.
That's amazing. That's probably one of the best insights that I've personally heard in the
I'm glad.
story, and definitely for our listeners as well. So, lastly, Salman, where can listeners connect with you or learn more about the work you do at Burq?
Yeah, go to burqup.com. That's where you can see what we're working on at Burq. Okay, we briefly talked about AI. We recently launched our AI product called Pulse AI. So go take a look. And more than welcome to connect with people through my LinkedIn. Please reach out. I love getting on calls with students, understanding what they're working on, see if I can help in any way possible. So yes, do reach out.
Well, Salman, thank you so much. This was some amazing insight, I have to say. This is something that the next generation of founders really needed, and I'm really glad that we were able to set this up and that these insights could be provided through your immense and amazing experience. So thank you again once more.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, that's it for my conversation with Salman. And like every episode, before we close out, I want to leave you all with a few key takeaways. First, validate through signals, not assumptions. Product market fit isn't one big breakthrough. It's a pattern of customers who need what you've built and get upset when it's gone and also keep coming back for more. So train yourself to spot those signals early and often. Second, do the hard part and skip the glamour. Honestly, shipping, selling, and iterating will always move the needle faster than branding, press, or the perfect pitch deck. The founders who win are the ones willing to lock in and do the unglamorous work day after day. And lastly, grow faster than your company does. Master each function before you hand it off. Build a team you trust and never lose pulse on what's happening across the business. The founder you are at 10 employees has to level up well before you hit 100. All right, that's all for this week's episode. For anyone interested, I've attached Salman's LinkedIn and a link to Burq in the show notes below. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning in. And until next time, this is Dorman Ventures.